hats off to you all again. It's Tuesday. We are back again with another program. Thank you to the 284 individuals who joined us last week. I want to welcome right now Dr. Monica Parker. She is our director of our Outreach Recruitment and Engagement Corps, as well as our Minority Engagement Corps with the Guazetta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. You're going to hear from her today, and then Whitney Wharton, and then Nare is going to come on to talk about what you can expect at 3 o'clock with the Cognitive Empowerment Program. Welcome, Dr. Parker.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us again on this Tuesday afternoon. And for the foreseeable future, we will continue to have our BrainTalk Live sessions, always beginning with John to give you a little cardiovascular exercise, but more important, the thing that John is teaching you is that you don't have to go to a gym to exercise. You can do it right at home in your own chair and play some music that you like. As long as you move, that's it. Today, we're going to talk about research and research centers. Many of the people who are on this call and have been participating in our programs aren't necessarily residents of the state of Georgia. You live in other states, and some of you live in other countries. So part of what we're going to do today is make you aware of, number one, what research centers there are here in the United States, but also to give you an update on what different research centers around the world are doing. My purpose today is to talk to you about the different research centers here in the United States that you may want to access if you don't reside here in Georgia. Dr. Whitney Wharton, who will be on a little bit right after me, is going to talk to you about the research discoveries and things that were made, revealed, if you will, and explained at the International Alzheimer's Association International Conference, which just finished in earlier this month in August in San Diego. Every year, the Alzheimer's Association convenes a conference of all the world's researchers in Alzheimer's disease. Not only do we study drug treatment trials in Alzheimer's, we do caregiving studies for people who are living with Alzheimer's dementia. There's research that's going on with respect to different diagnostic aspects of Alzheimer's. And then the other things that we've been talking about over time are the effects of environment, pollution, education, and other things that may affect one's susceptibility to Alzheimer's and related dementias. Before we get to a clinical drug trial, we do animal models, whether it's in a mouse or a chimpanzee. Before we test things on human beings, we do animal research. And so those are different kinds of science, but the purpose today is to make you aware of how you can participate in research around the country and around the world. So my next slide, please. Here in the United States, you see this map. The green and the light blue are states that have definitive Alzheimer's disease research centers. You see here in Georgia, you see here Florida, you see in North Carolina. Those are definitive NIH-funded sites. The light blue are states with an exploratory center, which means they're doing research there, but they're not at the same level or as large as the centers that are in the turquoise color. The gray areas don't have a definitive Alzheimer's research center. Okay, so these are where we're doing research all over the country. NIH, National Institutes of Health, funded Alzheimer's research around the country. In the Northeast, you have Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. In the deep South, Southeast, where we are, you have Georgia, you have Florida at the Mayo Clinic, and you have North Carolina at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I want to say Wake Forest. There are several institutions there. In blue, in Alabama, we have the University of Alabama. And then in Kentucky, we have the Sanders Brown Center in Lexington, Kentucky. So those are centers that I'm familiar with. So again, you can look this up. There's a website across the top of the map. You can put this into your own web browser, and you can pull this map up. And when you touch the map, the actual site, the address and the phone number for the research center will pop up. So I want you to look at that website, copy it, and then get this map yourself if you live someplace other than Georgia, so you can find out where Alzheimer's research is being done around the country. And again, Deja's put it in the chat. To find an Alzheimer's disease research center near you, visit this particular website. So the purpose I want you to know is that NIH, National Institutes of Health, which is funded by our tax dollars, is doing Alzheimer's research all over the country. And these are the states that have received funding for Alzheimer's research. Next. So Alzheimer's disease research centers by state: Alabama has one, Arizona has one, California has 6, Connecticut has one. You can look at this list and you can see where there are Alzheimer's disease research centers. Some states have more than one. California has 6, and that's because California is such a large state geographically. The other state that has more than one is going to be Massachusetts. You have several, 2 in Boston University and Harvard University systems. New York has 3. So again, there are several different locations where you can find an Alzheimer's disease research center. And as I said before, Deja has put up the website that you can look so you can find an Alzheimer's disease research center near you. Next. Here at Emory, if you are interested in the research that we are doing here, our main coordinator and triage person is Miss Latasha Chapman. Her number is 404-727-6050. 404-727-6050. I need to let you know that all of our Alzheimer's research centers aren't all doing the same bit of research. Different researchers in different centers are doing different kinds of research. And the research that you may see here in Georgia may not be research that's being done anyplace else. Our other coordinator that you can call, particularly if you are from an underrepresented minority group, that is Crystal Davis, 404-727-6696. If you call either of these numbers, Ms. Chapman or Ms. Davis will be happy to help you and identify some clinical research studies for you to participate in that may be here in our Alzheimer's disease research center or in our university center that kind of feed through at some point with our Alzheimer's disease research center. Because all of our research is not necessarily being done by neurologists who are treating Alzheimer's only. They may be neurologists who are treating sleep disorders. They may be exercise physiologists who are doing studies that have to do with exercise. They may be PhDs who are doing studies with dance, like Dr. Madeline Hackney, who's doing balance studies and working with people who have Parkinson's. So again, call Miss Latasha Chapman, 404-727-6050, or Miss Crystal Davis, 404-727-6696.
Why would someone want to be aligned with an ADRC research center versus some of these other enterprises that we see around the country?
Because Alzheimer's disease research centers aren't, I like to say that most the best way that I can put it is Alzheimer's disease research centers are not driven by profit. You know, they don't have to enroll 100 people to get $100,000. They've written grants, they're doing pure research. And yeah, we are getting some funding from the federal government, but that funding isn't something that's funding a private enterprise. And we can make sure and we can attest to the ethics, that proper ethics are going to be followed, that you will get follow-up, and you won't be exploited, is the best thing that I can tell you, because we have a set of ethics, a core set of ethics to conduct human subjects research, and we're all bound by those same kinds of requirements. So you're less likely to be in a research that's being conducted with a profit motive. A lot of for-profit research centers exist, And a lot of times those centers are not necessarily funded by, they're not, quite frequently, they're not funded by the federal government. But we're not trying to exploit you in one of our federally funded research centers. That's the best thing that I can say. I think that we conduct ethical research, and the research is conducted with an eye toward helping and assisting. And within these different centers, because of the ethics that we're trying to make sure we employ, people who need help for whatever seems to be identified will be made available, and information about how you can get assistance for whatever is found is made available to you. We conduct ethical research in our Alzheimer's disease research centers, and then those centers that are funded by the National Institutes of Health.
Thank you. I thought it would be important to make that distinction.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Whitney Wharton, who's an associate professor of nursing and has been long associated with our Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. She does a lot of research on women and estrogen and caregiving and other factors other than ApoE4, if you will, with respect to how we develop and how we may develop Alzheimer's or related dementia. So at this time, I'd like to bring on Dr. Whitney Wharton, who is going to talk to us about what was presented at the Alzheimer's International Conference. Dr. Wharton.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker, and thank you everyone for having us today. And thank you to the 214 of you that have logged on. I just wanted to touch 1 second on what Dr. Parker said about a potential benefit of being a research participant or just being affiliated with an Alzheimer's disease research center versus a different center. One thing that my family has unfortunately also been afflicted with Alzheimer's disease, which is why I became interested in this disease in the first place. One benefit is that it can be a one-stop shop for a number of concerns that are related to Alzheimer's disease and dementias, just general dementias. So we have experts in gait and balance with the concomitant behavioral issues that oftentimes are associated with dementia. We have neurologists and neuropsychologists, we have dietary experts, and we have resources for caregivers. So I think when you are associated with an Alzheimer's center, you're not just going in for a one-time cognitive evaluation or memory testing. We take a whole systems approach and try to treat you as an individual and see what tests you might need. And that might be blood tests, that might be MRI, that might be a lumbar puncture. You're able to do all of these things with the Alzheimer's Disease Center. And that's just not our center. That's a number of centers across the country. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit. So with that, I will share my screen. Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about today are results from the Alzheimer's Association International Conference that just ended. It took place in August, and this is a really great conference that everyone who's experienced in Alzheimer's disease tries to attend. So I'm going to give you the highlights that I think would be most relevant to this audience. The highlights include I'm going to give you some bullet points about exercise, about institutional, structural, and interpersonal racism, results pertaining to COVID-19, to diet, and specifically junk food versus healthy eating, and also women's health, talking about pregnancy and high blood pressure. And then I'll end with some research opportunities that are related to some of these highlights that we have going on right now at our Emory Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Also, you'll probably notice throughout some of my slides, I have a phone number listed, an email address, and a QR code. interested in learning about one or any more of these studies, particularly if you are someone who is a caregiver, or if you have a family history of Alzheimer's disease or dementia, or if you're interested in just learning more about the program, if you want to give us a call, we would love to speak with you, and we will find a study that works for you and works for your schedule, and we'll get you going. So, as I mentioned, Association International Conference is our huge forum, and we have both oral presentations and poster presentations, and it's the ability for it presents an ability for students, staff, faculty from all around the world to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia research. This year, we had more than 9,500 attendees, and we had more than 4,000 scientific presentations. And this is all condensed in a period of about 1 week. So these are 13-hour days for us. But we are very dedicated to our science and to learning from others, other scientists and people that aren't necessarily in our field. And so you'll notice some of these highlights I'm going to be mentioning. These aren't people that necessarily are doing research in the same area, but they're all related because we are all human, right? So, what we eat is important with, our exercise, which is important for sleep. And so it's where all of these investigators can come together and learn from each other. And these are just pictures of myself and my team presenting at that conference. So the first one that I wanted to highlight is about exercise. And this was results from an exercise study called Exert. Myself and Dr. Joe Nare were actually the principal investigators at Emory. This was a 13-site randomized clinical trial where we enrolled individuals who had mild cognitive impairment and randomized them to one of two potential treatment arms. The first one was we wanted to increase in individuals with MCI. We wanted to increase your heart rate and see if exercise was beneficial in preventing cognitive decline. Now, the second arm that you could have been randomized to was a study arm where you met with a group and you worked on balance, and you did stretching, you did gait exercises, and we didn't necessarily want to increase your cardiovascular output, but we still wanted you to exercise and stretch in some way. Now, these are the first results ever that were presented at this conference. And what we found was that people with mild cognitive impairment, which is the precursor to Alzheimer's disease, that actually both of these treatment arms were beneficial in slowing cognitive decline. And that was in comparison to a third study group that we oversaw for also 1 year. And the group that had no exercise intervention, that they didn't do any treadmill tests, they didn't do any stretching, they didn't do any yoga. They actually showed cognitive decline over that 1 year period. So this is really exciting, we think, and very, even though we didn't show significant differences between the two study arms, what this goes to show is that even baby steps, even like the very smallest thing that you can do to increase your cardiac output, to increase your flexibility, just doing the exercises as we started this program today, as we start every program with John, is really helpful. It's those little things. And I think that's really the main takeaway. So the second highlight that I wanted to note was that systemic racism led to cognitive decline and memory impairments. And there were two studies that they highlighted at the Association International Conference. The first was that there was a study with 1,000 middle-aged community dwelling older adults. 55% of that population was Latin American, 23% was Black, and 19% were non-Hispanic white. And what we found was that interpersonal and institutional racism was associated with lower memory scores, and the associations were strongest in individuals who self-identified as Black or African American. There was a second study in 445 Asian, Black, Latino, multiracial individuals who were very old, who were 90 and above. And these individuals who reported experiencing discrimination across their lifespan had poorer long-term memory in late life compared to people that had experienced little to no discrimination. And this is really important because as we are able to evolve as a scientific community, when we look at biological markers, what we have found is that not only are men and women, not only do men and women have sometimes different levels of biomarkers, and some of those are related to Alzheimer's and related dementias, but what we're finding is that based on race and ethnicity, sometimes there are differences in biological markers, and that is not to say at all that one population of individuals has better markers than others. It's just to ensure that, number one, that we are ensuring inclusivity in clinical research, but number two, we need to make sure that these medications work the same in every single person before we start getting prescription happy and prescribing medications or prescribing lifestyle interventions that might not be culturally sensitive. So what we found in our research is that African Americans actually have lower levels of one of the two primary hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, which is tau. And that is wonderful news for the African American community. However, if that is one of the markers that is being targeted for clinical purposes for treatment, then we need to know that. And we don't know why these biomarkers might be different. Some of it might be due to genetics, some might be due to predisposition for physiological aspects like high blood pressure, and some of it actually might be due to these lifelong experiences from systemic racism and access to resources. So there are also a lot of research, as you can probably imagine, related to COVID-19. And the one I thought was most interesting that I wanted to mention today was that of all of the symptoms related to COVID-19, it was the persistent loss of smell that was most closely related to long-lasting cognitive problems of individuals who were diagnosed with COVID. And the second, which is a little bit less surprising, is that COVID-19 related ICU stays might double the risk of dementia in older adults. And this was in comparison to people that were also staying in ICU, but for different reasons. If you were there for COVID, then that increased your risk for dementia. I just wanted to point to the one thing that, when we're talking about our senses, also, this is not the first time that Alzheimer's has been linked to the loss of a sensory ability. So Alzheimer's has been linked to loss of sense of smell, sense of taste, and loss of hearing. So I just wanted to point that out, that we're also seeing that with COVID-19. The second to last thing I wanted to mention is about diet and junk food. So there was a huge study that took place over the period of 8 years that had almost 11,000 people in it. And what this study found was that high consumption of very processed foods led to a 28% faster decline in memory. And high consumption of ultra processed foods is about 20% of your daily intake. So not even necessarily one meal. This isn't like driving through McDonald's for lunch. But if your snacks all day are comprised of these very these foods that are high in fat, high in sugar, have artificial flavors and colors and preservatives, this is directly related to cognitive decline. So some examples of these foods that are not good for you, not only because we know it makes you gain weight and feel yucky and it's not giving you proper nutritional value. The examples of these include soda, for sure, even diet soda, breakfast cereals, white bread, potato chips, and other frozen junk food. And that's just, so it's not just chocolate, it's not just chips. It's things that are really low in nutritional value and very high in salt and in sugar.
Whitney, excuse me, on that note, can you talk about processed meats? When you talk about ultra processed, what's the difference between a processed food and one that's not, just to be clear?
Sure. So the best thing that you can do for either meat, or you could do for vegetables or a grain, anything, is buy fresh. So if something is available at a farmer's market, if something is not processed, that is best for you. The second best would be frozen, but still just frozen generic. So frozen high nutritional value. So frozen broccoli, frozen fruit, things like that. The worst thing that is ultra processed always are items that are canned. And that's because there is so much salt. And this is for fruits, for vegetables, for meats, for breads. There's a reason that these foods last for 500 years. And it's because there's so much salt and so many preservatives in all of these. The best thing that you can do, again, is, the best ingredients are no ingredients. So if you can go to a farmer's market and just buy fresh, with meats, that's going to be things that haven't been through a ton of processing, like meats that are combined with other meats. It doesn't really matter what type of meat you're eating, although there is a lot of research showing that the Mediterranean diet is cognitively beneficial, and that includes a lot of fish. And fish that are high in omega-3, so fatty fish like mackerel, salmon is really good. So not like bottom-dwelling white fish that you would normally fry. And then also the preparation is very important. So if you can just eat it baked instead of fried, that would be great. That's just one small thing that you can do.
See, I said no spam and no hot dogs.
No spam, no hot dogs. And my very favorite is bacon. So if you're gonna eat a little bit is fine, but it's bacon every day. Eventually, that cholesterol is going to catch up with you. But bacon once every once in a while is fine. I think the thing with diet is finding something that works for you, and it's taking baby steps. So one of the reasons that a lot of, diet modifications never work, and people have to try 2 or 3 or 20 diets before you find one that might work for you for a little bit, is because it's such a drastic change in your pattern. And it affects your family, it affects your, sociocultural relationships with people, and it's just too much, and you're eating food that you don't like. So, just substituting extra virgin olive oil for butter when you're cooking, little things like that, but doing it every day, eventually you won't even know the difference. So just little things like that. The last thing I wanted to mention was issues surrounding women. And the big thing that came out of the Alzheimer's conference this year was surrounding high blood pressure during pregnancy, which is abbreviated HDP on this slide, and risk of accelerated brain aging. And there were around 5 studies that I noted, but only a few were noted in the Alzheimer's Association highlights. The first one is that high blood pressure during pregnancy was related to vascular dementia in late life. And that was regardless of how many pregnancies that you had, and regardless of how many live births that you had. Also, the second study that was highlighted was that severe preeclampsia had significant, women that reported preeclampsia had significantly higher levels of beta amyloid in their brain. And beta amyloid, as many of you that have been on these calls know, are it's one of the 2 main hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So there is something with pregnancy, there is something with circulating sex hormones that puts women more at risk. And this is just what I wanted to touch on. So this is the line of research that I'm particularly interested in and that Emory is really good at. So if you want to learn more about this or be in our study that's related to estrogen, then we call it the E2 study because that's the chemical abbreviation for estrogen, actually. This, again, our lab is the number to call. So the two biggest risk factors for Alzheimer's are age and gender, more specifically biological sex. And women are always disproportionately affected by Alzheimer's. One, we think it's the estrogen influence. The other is the lived experience of being a woman. So we're more likely to be caregivers. Women in their 60s are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's than to develop breast cancer. And I think that's a pretty startling statistic. And I've mentioned some of the reasons that we know that happens. So just to touch on the estrogen part, when our estrogen levels drop, but not only drop, but fluctuate, our heart and blood vessels become more stiff and less elastic. So it's kind of like taking a hose out from, underneath from your garage or underneath your deck. After a long winter, you kind of try to stretch it out and water your garden, but it's been under there for a second and the water doesn't run through it as properly as when the hose was brand new. That happens to women because of our altered estrogen levels as compared to when we were younger. So what we try to do is understand how that elasticity in our blood vessels work. And you also have blood vessels in your brain, not just in your body. So we're trying to understand that relationship. And all of these things that women are at risk for, including hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, and weight gain after they go through menopause, all of these are independent risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. And I'll skip through this one, but the last slide I'll just show is the study inclusion criteria for the estrogen study happening right now at Emory. We are enrolling about 100 more individuals. This is not just a study for women. This is a study for men as well. Women and men, all of us have circulating levels of estrogen and circulating levels of testosterone. So it's important to know what the relationship between these sex hormones are, both in our body and in our brain, and how these relate to things like inflammation, high blood pressure, and Alzheimer's disease biomarkers. Also, the social demographic information we collect, like sleep and stress and being a caregiver. Those are things that we look for. But we're looking for people who are between the ages of, we actually change this a little bit, 40 and 85, who are cognitively normal or have just very subjective memory concerns or mild MCI. So if you're interested, the number is 404-712-2654. So thank you so much for your attention, and I hope everyone, thanks for having me again.
Whitney, stay on. There are a couple of questions. I've been answering the Q&As, but I think that there are some in the chat specifically for you. Are you looking at maybe finding a safe level and way of administering estrogen to prevent Alzheimer's disease in women over 60?
That's a great question. So we, this has been done a couple of times, and I was involved with some of these studies. We are looking at, so if a woman is between 6 months and 2 years of her last menstrual period, then, or what she considers her last menstrual period, because at the end it can get a little bit muddled, then a woman can safely take hormone therapy for up to 4 years. And that can either be a pill, it can be a patch, it can be a cream. And so that is something that has been helpful. Something that is not necessarily helpful is for women who are far past this transition period when they stop menstruating and later on. And all of a sudden we give women estrogen and it just kind of is a shock to the system. That will put women at an increased risk for cancer. So that's not something that we did. And also the side effects that are associated with hormone therapy are not necessarily something that a lot of women want to deal with. We did this in the early 2000s. We didn't have any, adverse reactions, a very short trial, but we were trying to answer just that question. Could estrogen administration be beneficial? The main side effect in that study was breakthrough bleeding. So women started just, having their periods again. And that's not something that a lot of women want to do when you're 70, 80 years old. So I think we're done with that at that point. So what we're doing right now and where the field is going is that we're looking for soy and estrogen metabolites. So we have a clinical trial starting at Emory in October, and I'm the PI in this study. And so it's not estrogen, but it's an estrogen derivative. So it doesn't cause the same side effects, but we're looking to increase cognition and improve the blood vessel stiffness that I was talking about. And it's an over-the-counter supplement that's been shown to be very beneficial in Japan and in China and in the UK. And so we're going to try it in the US and see if it works. And this is going to be in people, women and men, again, who are 65 and over.
Do you have any similar studies about male hormones?
We did a bunch of
testosterones?
Sure. So we did and again, in this study that we're doing that we're calling E2, we also are measuring levels of testosterone in women and in men. We're measuring levels of progesterone, which is the counteractor of estrogen. So that's why we're enrolling men in this study as well. We're thinking that boosting sex hormones do all sorts of good things for the body. The slide that I blew through a second ago showed the area of the brain that is just chock full of estrogen and testosterone receptors. And that area of the brain is called the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that's primarily affected in Alzheimer's disease. It's the memory and the memory and working memory part of the brain. So that one study covers both. That would be the quick answer to that question.
Okay, so I see several questions about vaginal estrogen and vaginal dryness, and I'm going to answer this question from a primary care doctor's perspective. Vaginal dryness is local, okay? Taking a systemic hormone isn't necessarily going to alleviate that symptom. And for that reason, we have topical vaginal supplementation. So maybe it's a vaginal cream, estrogen cream, maybe it's an estrogen wafer, or the estrogen ring that we can use to help improve the surface of the vagina such that you don't have so much vaginal dryness, so that intimacy is not all that uncomfortable. And topical estrogen does have some systemic qualities, but not the same level of systemic effect that one that you take by mouth does. So it's concentrating its effect where you're putting it. So it's not making you more susceptible, for example, to breast cancer. Okay, now why did I bring that up? Because estrogen is one of the main fuels for estrogen-dependent breast cancer. And you're more likely going to have an effect by taking the oral preparation from that. So if you are experiencing vaginal dryness or vaginal itching, confer with your gynecologist and your primary care doctor about using a topical medication to help improve and relieve those symptoms. So if you are perimenopausal, like somewhere between 40 and 60, I'm going to say 40 and 60, and you're having hot flashes, that may be the time that you want to take an oral estrogen pill. But taking an estrogen pill from the time you begin menopause until you feel like you don't want to take it anymore, just so that you don't have vaginal dryness, is not the way we practice medicine, and that's not wise. Whitney?
Also, we'll just add that if you're experiencing that symptom or symptoms of memory complications or mood fluctuations that are just different than what you had before, you are 100% not alone. And same thing with hot flashes. And some of these things for certain women are really debilitating. I know a woman who recently had to quit her job because her hot flashes were just immense. They made her feel sick. She felt nauseous, and she just was very self-conscious, but did not want to go to her doctor to kind of discuss this. And she also had, a lot of vaginal dryness, which was affecting her and her partner. Don't be embarrassed. This is a physiological change that happens when women go through menopause, and it can last a long time. And there are very easy and very safe and very cheap cures for this, and it really will improve your quality of life. So I just urge you to talk to your PCP.
I'm going to agree with Dr. Wharton. When you have certain symptoms, you really need to not be quiet, but you need to open your mouth and bring these subjects up with your doctor. And I'm a family physician, so I see everybody. But sometimes a lot of us who are over 65, we still see our gynecologists. And if these are things that are still bothering us, we need to talk to whoever it is who treats us for those things. So if you have a primary care doctor, discuss it with him or her. And if they feel you need to see a gynecologist or a urogynecologist for those symptoms, a lot of older women who are postmenopausal, in addition to having vaginal dryness, may also have frequent urination and burning. And it's not that they're infected, it's because they have that atrophy, we call it vaginal atrophy, that causes a problem. And there are treatments, as Dr. Wharton is alluding to, that can be used for that, to manage that. And a couple of last year, sometime or other, and I guess I'm going to have to bring her back, we've had a gynecologist come on and talk about what kinds of preparations we should use for that level of discomfort. So I'm going to stop right here. Thank you, Dr. Wharton. I hope you come back, because there's some other things we want to know. You see, we have a lot of questions about the estrogen and more information about the study that you're doing with respect to the estrogen and the testosterone. Whitney has, Dr. Wharton has put in, Deja has put in the chat how we can get in touch with Dr. Wharton. They're on top of every one of our slides. And when you replay this show next week, or this program next week, you can get more of the same information. So thank you, Dr. Wharton. At this time, Megan Nare will talk to us about Cognitive Empowerment Program in the next 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And thanks so much for all the information today. It was so good to hear from Dr. Whitney about all of the research and the things going on at the ADRC that really do come up every single day at our program at Emory's Cognitive Empowerment Program. And my name is Megan. I am the yoga instructor there, and I lead the yoga program as part of our physical activities. And really what the Cognitive Empowerment Program is a solution to what happens oftentimes in clinic after a diagnosis of a cognitive change, where maybe you're presented with all this research about all the things that could make a good difference, things like exercise and doing a different nutrition and adding the Mediterranean diet like Dr. Whitney talked about. But you may have a hard time really adapting to those changes at home, to really making those small changes at home. And so the Cognitive Empowerment Program is a solution that really says, what would make a difference if we had a program that you came to once a week for a whole year to help adapt all of these things into your life? And what CEP is a partnership between Emory University and Georgia Tech that introduces things into people's lives after a diagnosis of something like MCI, mild cognitive impairment, to help add a comprehensive lifestyle program that promotes joy, purpose, health, and wellness.
So anybody can enroll in this program? Are you going to tell us? This is Dr. Parker. You're saying it's for anybody with mild cognitive impairment. Are you saying that anybody can enroll in this program?
Absolutely. You can enroll by coming in through the Emory clinics and going through a lot of different, I'll drop some information in the chat if you're interested in joining. And once you're enrolled in the program, what we do today is we'll have a program right after BrainTalk Live from 3 to 4 o'clock, where we have all of our service providers come in and present an hour long of what we offer, a little sampling of what we offer as far as all of those lifestyle changes go. But anyone can join if in the Atlanta area. If you live within the Atlanta area, we have people who drive maybe an hour and a half sometimes, but especially if you're in the local area, if you're part of the Emory clinics, if you've been coming in for some care, we'll give you some information on how to join the program. We're always looking for new participants, especially if you're really one of those people who find themselves saying, how can I make these changes with baby steps at home? So give me a moment here and I'll drop it into the chat, but we'll be sharing today from 3 to 4. And I'll provide that information here on how to not just join the program today, but also join the program in person at our program that we've built with a physical environment at Executive Park 6 there. And let me just drop this into the chat here as I jump over to the screen. All right, so there's some information coming to you on how to join the program in person for our in-person year-long program. And I'm also going to share about how to join for CEP Live today, our virtual webinar where our therapeutic service providers come in and share what we offer every day at CEP.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. Again, if you have already participated in CEP, you do not need to register again. You just disconnect from this webinar and join their Zoom webinar. She also mentioned a different opportunity through their program. It is a research study. There is some eligibility requirements. So if you want to know more about that, you can use that contact information that Megan shared. So those are two distinct programs. One that they offer weekly right after our program that features the various service providers. And then there's a program where you have to actually go through a process, and a vetting process, I'll say, where there are eligibility requirements. So a little bit more of a hurdle, but if you want to see a little bit more about CEP, people are saying they can't see what you shared, Megan, so share it again. The CEP live chat, that's the 3 o'clock webinar that's about to go live right after this program. If you'll share it again, Megan, for those that could not grab the link.
The information that Megan Nare has spoken about is in the chat. I don't know why you can't see it. It is in the chat. Okay, Megan.
Thank you. And today we have Suzette Binford, who's phenomenal from our program, and she's going to be talking about service utilization, finding services in the community for older adults, caregivers, people with disabilities, and not just that, but also how to pay for them. So join us through the links we just shared there, and we're going to be hopping on right now. So thank you all so much, and thanks for having me today.
Thank you.